everyone is from. Nice to see everyone joining us today. Hi, Tan.
Hi.
That was smooth. We got it in.
Good. And it's funny, I couldn't hear you a second ago, but now I can hear you beautifully.
Okay, so
That's
it's working?
working.
Okay. It says you are not audible. Hopefully everyone can hear me. If not, I can turn off this mic. Hopefully it's working.
No, it says it's better now.
Okay.
How are you?
Hi. Okay. Long time no
I
see.
know.
All right. So we are talking about kiddos who are struggling with making friends.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that this is now, so we're past, last time you and I did an IG Live, we spoke about, not that those after school meltdowns. Now, I think that we're still there, but I think that now parents start to go, okay, we've been at school for a month for many kiddos, and those friendships aren't quite happening, right? They're just coming home and saying they're not playing with somebody. So I think that this is a big one for parents.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes when kids are in a new school, this is they go to junior high, or they get to high school, or it's the little ones who that often we see that where kiddos when they're in a new situation, especially those slow to warm kids who are a little more shy, and having to be put in a very chaotic kind of environment, lots of noises, lots of things going on, and yeah, that we see that a little bit more.
Totally, totally, totally. So a few things come to mind here. And it's funny as I think about my own experience. I've got two little girls, and the little one in grade one, she just naturally fits. She's what we call a dandelion kid. She naturally fits wherever she goes. Whereas Una is more highly sensitive. And I think sometimes when you hear from your kids, I play by myself at recess, or I would rather read at recess, which is things that she says to me sometimes. I want to jump in there and fix it and go, okay, what do we do here? Like, whose number do I have? Let me talk to the school. And I think that one of the best things that I've learned is that she just needs me to sit with her when she's struggling. She just needs me to hear that she's in pain instead of trying to fix it. And I think as parents, we so often want to fix it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's our empathy for our kids. It pains us to see our kids in pain. So, of course, like we want to do that. But we also want kids to know they can handle hard things too. So if we jump in to fix it, we're saying like you're incapable of kind of dealing with this and I'm uncomfortable with your feelings.
Yeah. So, Tammy, I'm just saying, just tell us if you can hear us. I'm seeing a couple of people saying no audio. I can hear you beautifully,
Mhm.
Tammy. So I'm not quite sure what's going.
Well, I can try just taking off the mic. Let's try it. All right, we'll try them without. Now there's no mic.
There's
So,
no mic, and that's funny. Your sound, the people can say they can hear us. Okay,
okay.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so here's someone saying that their kid is confident in small groups with people he knows, but he masks all day. Yeah, so sorry, Tammy, go ahead. So as you were saying, we feel for them, and so we want to fix.
Yeah, I want to fix it because, and unfortunately, when we try to fix, it comes from a place of anxiety for our kids. And then the kids pick up on that and they're like, oh, this must be as bad as I thought it was. And not to undermine that their kids are struggling, but it makes it a lot worse when our emotional kind of barometer is saying like, this is a really big deal and I'm now anxious and fearful for my child. And then like the kids feed off of that. And they're like, oh, like this is really bad. Mom, like look at mom, look at her reaction. So I think you're kind of saying start with the parent first and how we're responding to kiddo when they come and say this.
Yeah, and it's not to say that we can't, start thinking, how can I help? But in that moment, I think really what they need from us is just like, oh, today was hard, and I just want to be able to talk to somebody. I want to be heard instead of us jumping into problem solving super quickly with them. The other thing that I've learned is that for me, being in social groups when I was growing up was important. So often what we end up doing is we put our own feelings and thoughts onto our kid. And what I've learned, for example, with my little one is that she's very happy to read. She's very happy to do structured things at recess. She's very happy to have like different people she can connect with on the playground without having a set social group. And so often we bring our own stuff into that and go, oh, this is terrible. When maybe that actually isn't our child's experience at all. Maybe they really don't care.
Yeah, but they're picking up on that we don't approve of how they're kind of navigating what is going on. What And if we kind of switch gears just a bit here, so we cover everything, just because we only have like 25 minutes, is often I see in private practice that the kiddos that can struggle, and this is the kiddos that I'm doing parent consults with, are the kids who can be a little bit controlling with friends, and this can push kids away. So that's one subset. What's another subset you see? So we sometimes see that.
I can see that.
Um,
I think too, a subset of kids that I see is that they're just kids who are unique in their own way. So they really, it's going to be probably very hard for them to find that belonging at school. And so I work on them with the difference between belonging and fitting in. And what do we want? And that school is not the only place where you can find belonging. It's also in extracurriculars. It's also in your neighborhood friends. So often I find that it's just kids who are unique in their own way and don't necessarily fit into what else is happening at school or within their school culture.
yeah.
So I find control. Some kids who there might be some controlling elements, and then some kids who are just different from the group that they find themselves in.
Yeah. So you've got the kiddos like who maybe struggle with emotion regulation. So there's a bit of a reactivity that goes on, or they're highly anxious. And anxious kiddos can be controlling because they're just like, I just want people to do what I'm doing because I feel inside like I'm really overwhelmed. And so we're starting kind of just to query, like, and the only way we can do this, by the way, is by talking with the teachers who see them interacting with their peers. So before we jump in, we're going to try to bring our logical brain online and have a phone call, an email conversation, you know, openly with the teacher and just saying, I'm just wondering what you're seeing. So we're trying to be objective as possible instead of just, banging on the door and being like, why isn't someone intervening? Like we don't know the whole story yet. So, I always encourage them just to say, like, what are the EAs, the teacher's assistants, what are they seeing on the playground with this child? Like, are they interacting? What do those interactions look like? When we're teaching social skills, this doesn't happen at school, it happens at home.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens in a more controlled environment with, where we can bring in siblings or other kids for play dates. Maybe it's counseling to work on anxiety, because if they're anxious, they're going to be controlling, and that can be very intrusive to other kids. And so we kind of wonder, like, where could this be coming from? But we almost need to see it happen to be like, well, what could this be?
Mm-hmm.
But if we have them at home, we can work on maybe it's empathy, or maybe it's, we can do that with siblings, or we can watch them and start to mirror back what's going on and help them problem solve. Like, I wonder how we approach this child, your sibling, your friend who lives next door in a different way, so we can teach those skills and they can practice those skills at home. It's really hard to teach a child something where they can't practice it, which is difficult. While we can't just teach it and tell our children what to do, and they get to school and then they will completely forget.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like there has to be a dress rehearsal for that at home, best with other kids. This is where play dates are really great, or working with sibling relationships, and also monitoring, like, how do you model communication? What kind of language do you use when you're talking with your kids? Like, when we're wanting to get our kids to engage in something. So how do we talk to our spouses, like, when we want to engage in something? Like, so I think we have to also think about, like, what kind of goes on at home and what skills have been taught to kids in terms of, like, manners, taking turns, these kinds of things. And it's really difficult to do that without that practice that goes on in the home environment.
I love what you say there. I often say that about social and emotional learning programs. They're fine, they're good, they're nice icing on the cake, but the cake has to happen. The actual cake, the substance happens. So for me, when I work with these kiddos in practice, exactly what you're saying there, is with permission. Obviously, I love to be able to talk to the teacher, sometimes to the counselor, just to get that inside view of what's actually happening for our kids. And then with the child themselves in practice, there's a number of things that I do. So if it is anxiety, we're working on anxiety. If it is some of those skills, we're working on those skills. I always talk to them, as I mentioned earlier, the difference between belonging and fitting. I talk to them about finding their people, that sometimes finding your people, it can be one or two instead of 20 people. But who are your people, and where do we look for those people? And that I've worked in workplaces where I don't necessarily feel like I belong, but I've had other people around me. And it's the same with school. You don't have to find your belonging at school. School is just one part of the pie. So when I work with this with kids who are struggling with friendships, that's always what I look at, is where do we find your sense of belonging? And then how do we help you to be well at school according to how you define wellness? What do you need right now? So that's always the part that I take with kiddos when they come in and say, I have no friends at school.
Yeah. So where else can they cultivate that? I always like tell my kids too that, what's most important is your family. And here you always have kindness, you have love, we have family and cousins. And so it can be really hard right now and it feels lonely. But remember when you come home, and that's what I always think, if kids have that really loving, responsive parents and siblings and a village, if they can, when they come home at the end of the day, they're usually going to be fine. Like they will adapt and they do find friends eventually. um, but that's just one thing to consider. And I know one of the things, having now a 16-year-old who's very introverted and who's a little quirky, for being honest, she felt very isolated till she got to a bigger school where there was, like you were saying, like a bigger pond where she
Yeah,
had kids that were more like her. And so we can find that with extracurriculars or neighborhood kids or cousins or all these other things. But also knowing, like telling kids, like eventually you're going to be in a bigger school and you're going to find kids who are just like you. And it is coming.
yeah.
Like it's gonna, and same thing I tell teenagers who are struggling, that when you go to college or you go to the new work environment, like when the pond gets bigger, it gets easier.
I love that. And I always say to them, your quirkiness, if you don't feel like everybody else, your quirkiness is you. We want you to keep that quirkiness. Time you will find your people. Don't give up on that quirkiness to fit in. It's the belonging that actually matters. So I always work really, really deeply on that. And we talk about, for my kids, we've got a great neighborhood full of kids. So they find belonging. They go to Ninja, they find belonging there. And then I also find sometimes with kiddos who struggle, that when the school does things that are more structured during recess, it can be helpful too. So, for example, one of my kids the week she does handball at school and she loves it because it's a structured interaction with other kids, with a teacher, and that's where she thrives. So I find sometimes the interactions help with our kids who are struggling too.
Oh, and two, like there, if we look about like how we've raised kids, like in our whole evolution as a species, only very recently in the last 100 years, if not less than that, maybe 50 years, we started putting kids in same age groups. And kids actually socialize better in mixed age groups. So, as a former teacher, when I had kids struggling with making friends, I didn't force them to interact with kids their age, actually. That was counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are often lacking certain social skills and competencies. So what's actually better is if the teacher or EAs or somebody, as a counselor, can match them with a student who's older, or have them help out with students who are younger. That will develop competencies with your child because they're maybe more emotionally matched to younger kids anyway, so that works better for them. And they also develop confidence and self-efficacy because they're helping out another child. And then versus when they're matched with older kids, then the older ones are teaching them skills, how to maintain eye contact, how to take turns. They can help with emotion regulation skills.
Oh, we just lost your sound. Oh, there, it's back. Yeah.
So I would say matchmaking with different age groups within the school is often very, very helpful. And what I would do with kids who are just like, I swear they walk into trouble with peers. Like they just don't read social skills. They can't see that they're maybe other kids aren't enjoying them. They're being a little bit intrusive. Like they're just struggling a little bit. It would be like you're saying structure is it. I would keep those, keep them in and give them something to do at recess. Like, not maybe every day. I know they need exercise and they need outdoor times, but if they keep running into trouble, and then this leads to all kinds of issues, is like I may have them do something constructive in my room with me there. And they can still play. I can give them toys to play with, or they can help me clean up. So then they feel like they're helping. But like giving them something, again, they're matched with someone who's older and it's just more appropriate. Now, I know not all teachers will do this, but I have seen this work really, really well when I taught kindergarten all the way up to third grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did not send those kids into the fire if they didn't have the social skills. It just never went well. And then they just face more and more rejection from their peers. So I think there's some scaffolding that kind of needs to happen with either matchmaking with other kids. Sometimes I've seen teachers take a child in the classroom who is just like, who gets it, who's very socially competent, and even match that child with the child who's struggling. Just being, can you ask so and so to play with you, to play with you at recess today, or maybe one time this week. And those kids, those really, really highly emotionally intelligent kids, they want a job. They're like, sure.
Yeah.
And it can work really, really well. I went to a school like that where they would take them. I was one of those kids. They'd match with those kids. And we never told them that the teachers said to do that. And they just include, and then there was inclusion, right?
You know what that reminds me of? We're not talking about bullying today. That's a whole nother topic. But Jessica Alexander on our podcast, she did a podcast on bullying, and she talks about how in Denmark they'll often match kids in the classroom. So the way they approach bullying is from a whole classroom perspective. And I think it's the same with social interactions when we approach from a whole classroom perspective to go, who's connecting, who's not connecting, how do I move kids around? It shifts because then it's the adults leading instead of the children leading.
Yeah, because you get the blind leading the blind sometimes with these kids. So hopefully that's helpful to everyone. There's just some ideas. Oh, I wanted to mention play. So if you've got a kid who's a little bit socially awkward, and sometimes that's just comes with their quirkiness, but sometimes it actually comes from a lack of play, like where they haven't had a lot of, it starts with unstructured kind of child-led play where they're doing dress up and making art, and eventually it should bridge by 6 into social play, whether it's with the neighborhood kids or cousins or siblings. So if you have a kiddo who's just been on a lot of structured activities and hasn't had a lot of play, there's a chance that they did not gain the skill set to play appropriately with other kids. So one of the best things you can do for them is to take away structured activities and get them playing at home with a sibling. Like, so you're still there to navigate things a little bit if you need to intervene, but the more they start to play in an unstructured way, make believe, Lego with other kids, hide and seek with kids, jumping on the trampoline, riding bicycles, where it's like all the, hopefully a mixed age group is the best. They will start to, that's how they're designed to learn social skills. So often kids who don't have social skills lacked this sort of play. They're
Mm-hmm.
meant to do this in these beautiful mixed age groups where they learn from one another and they understand like limit setting and eye contact and tone and intonation. It's very difficult to teach that in the bubble. It has to, like I said, be taught with other kids, and that's done through this child-led play where adults kind of get out of the way and kids will engage in that play in the home or in the backyard or in the neighborhood.
No,
That's how Mother Nature designed them to learn social
love
cues.
it.
By about 5 to 6 is when they start to really figure that out. It starts before that with the parents.
Yeah, Tam, I love that. Such a good point. And we talk a little bit about that in our book, Parenting Handbook. So we hope that there's some ideas here. Be curious about what's going on for your kiddo. Talk to other adults. Look deeper at what might be going on, and then figure out where your child finds their belonging. Make sure that there's lots of play infused in there, and make sure that there's lots of social, emotional learning happening at home too.
Yeah, and everyone, this is recorded, so it's going to show up on our Instagram Reels, or the Reels section of Instagram. All of our Instagram lives are recorded, so if you're like, I just tuned in, oh my God, I missed it. It's okay, it's recorded. It will be in there. You can watch this later, so don't stress about that.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks.
Okay, bye everyone.